At the will reading, my two sons blocked my seat. "You're not mentioned here." I opened my folder and... "I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Annette from Bahamas. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything." They crossed their arms like bodyguards. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," Marcus said firmly, his voice cold. Danny nodded behind him. "This is for people named in Uncle Jim's will." I stared at my two grown sons wearing their best black suits. Blocking the empty chair meant for me. People named in the will. I was Uncle Jim's sister. The only sister he had left. The conference room felt ice cold despite the fancy leather chairs and mahogany table. I clutched my worn brown briefcase against my chest like armor. Inside were documents that would change everything. Original papers, not copies. But right then, nobody cared about my briefcase. Not the lawyer typing on his laptop. Not the secretary organizing papers. Not even my nephews who barely looked up from their phones. "I got a letter from Davidson Law Firm," I said quietly, holding up the official invitation. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Must be a mistake, Mom. We're handling Uncle Jim's affairs now. He made us executors last month. I'm his blood sister." Danny forced a fake smile, the one he used when explaining why he couldn't visit for holidays. "Mom, listen. You're not listed anywhere in this version. We'll talk about it later at home. Please don't cause trouble." I looked down at the carpet. Dark blue with tiny gold flowers, a coffee stain near the window. The silence stretched between us. Then I stepped forward carefully. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I said softly. "I'm here because Jim wanted me here." "You're not on our list," said the young man behind the desk. His nameplate read A. Peterson. He looked nervous, uncomfortable. I felt sorry for him. "Jim would have wanted me here," I repeated. This time I spoke to the whole room. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. I handed it to Mr. Peterson. "Please give this to Mr. Davidson," I said clearly. "It changes everything you think you know about Uncle Jim's wishes." Mr. Peterson blinked twice, took the envelope, and walked toward the back office. Marcus started to protest, but Danny grabbed his sleeve. "Let's just wait," Danny whispered. I sat down in the chair they had blocked. Neither son tried to stop me. My briefcase rested on my knees, no longer a shield but proof of what they didn't know. I hadn't planned to speak first. I'd imagined this moment many times. The formal reading, the serious atmosphere, everyone listening respectfully. Not this ugly scene with my own children treating me like a stranger. I glanced across the table at a cousin I hadn't seen in 15 years. She gave me a small smile. Smiled back. The office door opened. Mr. Davidson walked out. Tall, silver-haired, always wearing glasses that slipped down his nose. He held my envelope, reading through it very slowly. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "could I speak with you alone for a minute?" Marcus jumped up. We were told this was just family. Mr. Davidson ignored him completely. "This involves business papers from 2010. Please follow me." I stood up and followed him down the hall. My legs felt steady despite the heavy feeling in my chest. His private office smelled like old books and coffee. There were no chairs, just a tall table. He spread my papers out flat. "This is very interesting," he said quietly. "You and Jim made a business partnership in 2010. Official papers, signed by witnesses, filed with the state. This was made before the will your sons brought me. Jim insisted on it back then. He said he didn't trust anyone but you." Mr. Davidson looked up at me. "Legally, this partnership means you own half of everything unless you both agreed to cancel it. Did you ever cancel it?" "No, never." He nodded once. "Then you own 50% of his entire business, his house, his savings accounts." There was a long pause. "Do the boys know about this?" "They suspect something's wrong, but no, they don't know." He breathed out slowly. "Would you like me to tell them?" "No," I said firmly. "Let them hear it when everyone else does." He studied my face, then closed the folder. "You're staying for the reading." "Yes," I said. "Now that I'm allowed to sit down." When I walked back into the conference room, both sons stared at me. But I could see they knew something had changed. For once, I didn't feel like I was begging for permission. My apartment was silent when I got home that evening. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind that makes you feel like the walls are watching you. I hung my coat on the hook, took off my shoes, and went straight to the tiny kitchen. The light above the sink kept flickering. It had been broken for weeks, but I lived alone, so I never bothered fixing it. I heated water for tea, even though my stomach was too nervous to drink anything. Old habit. This kitchen used to be full of noise. Marcus complaining about school homework. Danny laughing at cartoons on TV. Jim stopping by with donuts every Sunday morning. My husband Tony clinking his coffee mug against mine before leaving for work. That felt like a different lifetime. Tony died 18 years ago during winter. His heart just stopped while he was shoveling snow. He was gone before the ambulance could reach our house. I remember sitting on our front steps in my pajamas, snow soaking through my slippers, phone slipping from my frozen fingers. Marcus was 25. Danny was barely 22. They cried for a few days. Then everything became about practical stuff. Who gets the truck? Who pays the rent? Who handles the insurance money? They jumped into being adults like people jump into cold water. Quick, shocking, without thinking. First I was proud. Marcus got a job selling cars and made good money within 6 months. He could talk anyone into anything. Danny stayed close to home, learned to fix computers, opened a small repair shop with his friend from high school. He said he liked solving problems with his hands. I helped both of them whenever they needed it. I always helped. When Marcus's car lot got robbed and he needed money to stay open, I gave him my savings. When Danny's business partner stole their equipment and ran away, I used my retirement money. No questions asked. Just love. That's what mothers do. And when Jim got sick, one evening about a year after he moved nearby, he asked if we could become business partners. People change when money's involved, he said. Let's make sure they can't change our agreement. We went to a lawyer, Mr. Davidson's old partner, and made everything official. 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, each of us owning half of everything. I thought it was more ceremony than necessary, but Jim wanted it done properly. Years went by. Jim's mind got worse, but he still smiled when I brought him comic books. Still called me little sister, even when he forgot what year it was. He died on a Tuesday afternoon in his sleep. Peaceful. I sat with him for 3 hours before calling anyone. Not because I was in shock, just because some people deserve a quiet goodbye. The funeral was small. Just family and a few neighbors. Marcus gave a speech that sounded like he practiced it in the mirror. Danny stood stiff with his hands in his pockets. Neither of them had visited Jim more than once in the past 2 years. But after the funeral, everything changed. They both started asking about Jim's money. Marcus called me every few days. Danny came by without warning. They offered to help with paperwork. You shouldn't handle this alone, Mom. I let them help. I watched. Waited. When the letter from Davidson Law Firm arrived, I didn't mention it. The letter had my name on it, my address, no mistake. Then last week I heard Marcus on his phone while he thought I was in the bathroom. She doesn't need to be there, he said into the phone. We have the final paperwork. Everything's arranged. I went to my bedroom, opened my jewelry box, and took out the brown briefcase. Everything they thought was arranged had been signed away years ago. Still, part of me hoped I was wrong. Hoped they were just being careless, not cruel. But today proved they weren't. Today they blocked my chair. Jim and I were born 10 months apart. People called us Irish twins back then. I was the quiet one, always reading books, always listening. He was the loud one with messy hair and too many jokes for a boy his age. We shared a bedroom until we were 14. He taught me how to skip school by pretending to be sick and how to lie without getting caught stealing cookies. I taught him how to save money, how to write thank you notes, how to keep secrets without breaking under pressure. Our parents died young. Plane crash on their anniversary trip when I was 20. Jim was 19. We were alone in the house we grew up in. 2 kids with nobody but each other. We sold the house within 6 months and moved to a small apartment. Got jobs, paid bills, figured out life together. I met Tony at a coffee shop of all places. He was fixing their espresso machine. Said my laugh sounded like music when I joked with the customers. I said he was being too smooth. He said smooth's better than rough. I married him 8 months later. Jim never married, but he lived well. He traveled when he could. Mexico, Hawaii, even Alaska once. He drove trucks, managed a warehouse, worked at a radio station. His stories always ended in unexpected places. Every time he visited for my birthday or Christmas or just because he was lonely, he brought something weird. A cactus shaped like a heart, a t-shirt with dancing lobsters, a jar of pickles from a roadside stand in Texas. The boys loved him when they were little. Uncle Jim. They'd shout, running to hug him at the door. He'd spin them around, let them stay up late, give them candy before dinner. Tony would laugh and say, "He's not here to parent them. He's here to remind them that life should be fun." That changed over the years. Once Marcus started college, he stopped coming around when Jim visited. Danny followed his example but with less attitude. They grew tired of Jim's stories. Said he was annoying. I watched it happen like watching paint peel slowly, then faster until one day you notice the whole wall looks terrible. When Jim moved closer after getting sick, early memory problems, then worse confusion, neither son offered to help. Not even a phone call. Too busy, they'd say. Jim knew, even with his failing memory, he knew. One day, as I helped him organize his pills, he said quietly, "They'll show up when I'm dead. Watch them circle like vultures over roadkill. Only caring when there's something to grab." He wasn't bitter, just realistic. He said it the way you'd say it looks like rain. His memory got worse steadily but slowly. First, he forgot how to work his TV remote. Then he started losing his keys every day. Then he began calling me by our mother's name instead of mine. I never corrected him. What good would it do? But there were moments when he'd look at me and his eyes would focus and he'd say, "Sarah, if I ever forget who I am, just keep reminding me who you are." I promised I would, and I did. I took care of him until he died. It wasn't always easy. There were nights he wandered outside and I had to find him walking in his pajamas. There were mornings I found ice cream in the oven and bread in the freezer. But I never got angry because love isn't just about happy times. It's about staying steady when someone else is falling apart. Near the end he stopped talking. Just small nods, sometimes a wave. But when I sat beside his hospital bed and held his hand, he always squeezed back. The day before he died, he squeezed my hand 3 times. Once for I, once for love, once for you. I didn't cry when he passed. Not right away. Grief has its own schedule. But now, weeks later, I miss him in strange ways. The extra plate I still set out for breakfast. The sound of his favorite TV shows that no longer play. And today in that room, when Marcus stood in front of me like a security guard and said, "You're not mentioned here," I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because if Jim had been in that room, healthy, sharp, alive, he would have said, "You boys are about to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who's already lost everything except her backbone." That's why I brought the briefcase. Not to start a fight. Not to win some game, but because I promised Jim I'd never let anyone forget who I was. And I plan to keep that promise. The morning after the will reading, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold and a sealed envelope in front of me. It contained a copy of the business partnership Jim and I signed together. Official papers, witnessed, filed with the government for years in my safety deposit box, untouched. I hadn't opened it since we signed it. I didn't need to. I remembered every word. A dull headache had settled behind my eyes. Not pain exactly, just heaviness. The kind you carry when you know something big has started that you can't stop. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was noticing. Noticing how Marcus hadn't called. Not even a text message. Danny either. That was the first time I felt it. The change from mom to burden. Danny was sneakier. He didn't ask for control. He asked for pity. When he needed new tires for his truck, it was just a small loan. When his girlfriend left him, I was the one who cleaned his apartment while he cried on the couch. He never yelled at me. He just forgot to say thank you. And slowly, over the years, I stopped offering help. Not out of anger, just self-protection. The envelope on the table reflected the morning sunlight. I reached out, opened it, and spread the papers across the table. My handwriting was there beside Jim's on the signature page. Strong, clear, no shaking in the pen. We'd been so sure back then, so united. This agreement cannot be cancelled unless both parties agree in writing, it said. Jim never wanted to cancel it, and neither did I. Even as his mind faded, he still trusted me to remember for both of us. Now that trust was written in legal language. I sat there a long time reading the pages like they were a letter from him. In a way they were. After a while, I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't used in almost 10 years. Davidson Law Firm, this is Rebecca speaking. Hello, dear. Could I speak with Mr. Davidson, please? This is Sarah Chen. One moment, Mrs. Chen. He answered on the second ring. Sarah, I was about to call you. Were you? I asked, letting him hear the doubt in my voice. Yes, I've looked over everything carefully. Your partnership agreement is solid. Your claim isn't just real, it takes priority. You own half of everything Jim had. The will your sons brought me shouldn't have been processed without checking for earlier agreements. So it's final. It's final, he confirmed. I've sent notice to the bank. Jim's business assets are being split 50-50 into your name. The house, the savings, the investment accounts, everything listed in the 2010 partnership. You should get official confirmation by next Friday. I thanked him and hung up. Then I stared out my window. The apple tree Jim planted in my backyard in 1998 was blooming again. White flowers reaching toward the sky like tiny hands. I'd always wondered why he chose that tree. He said it reminded him of something sweet but tough. Today I understood what he meant. The apartment was too quiet. Not the silence of calm, but the silence of waiting, like the moment before thunder. And I knew they would come. Not today but soon. They would come with apologies, explanations, excuses, all dressed up as caring. They would come with flowers they bought at a gas station and smiles that didn't match their eyes. They would say things like, we were confused and we didn't understand. And I would listen because I've learned that listening often shows more truth than talking. That's when I made my decision. Not about revenge. That was never my goal. But about clarity. This wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making sure they never again mistook my kindness for weakness. I reached for a notepad, wrote down a name, then a second, then a third. A plan was forming in my mind. One that would need patience and careful thinking. And me, fully awake, fully present, fully unwilling to be invisible. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone I was going to see another lawyer. Not that day. Let them think I was still sitting in my kitchen, shocked, hurt, waiting for them to call. Let them believe I was curled up in my chair, looking at old photos, whispering their names through tears. Let them believe it because that's the version of me they felt comfortable with. The quiet woman who gave, forgave, and stepped aside without asking for a place at the table. But I wasn't walking into Davidson's office for tears or sympathy. I had a briefcase in my purse and a list of names on my notepad, and I had one very clear purpose. Mr. Davidson looked up from his computer, surprised. Sarah, he said, standing up. You didn't need an appointment, but I'm glad you came. I want to make the transfer official, I said, sitting without waiting to be invited. All of it. I want the house deed, the bank accounts, and the business papers updated. And I want protection in place. He blinked. Protection. Yes, legal barriers. I don't want either of my sons getting access to one penny of Jim's estate. Not through tricks, not through power of attorney, not even through charm. Pause. Especially not through charm. Davidson cleared his throat, reached for his pen. We can write a blocking clause. You have every right to do that, and the property deeds can be changed to show sole ownership. That process takes a few weeks. I'd like to move the bank accounts immediately. There's too much cash sitting unprotected. Understood. He opened a file, pulled out forms. As he filled them out, I looked around the room. His office smelled like paper and furniture polish. Not fancy, not expensive, but it felt steady, reliable, like Tony's workshop used to be. Full of tools that did what they promised. I also want to set up a trust, I said, interrupting his writing. A trust for someone who still treats me like a human being. Do you have a beneficiary in mind? He nodded. Her name's Emma. Emma Rodriguez, my neighbor's granddaughter. She's 24. Works evenings at the city hospital. Visits me every other week like clockwork. Never asked me for anything. He looked up, slightly amused. And you want to make her heir to Jim's estate. Not all of it, but a good portion. Enough to give her choices. Enough to let her breathe easier. He smiled gently. That's very generous of you. No, I said. Right. We worked quietly for some time. I signed where needed, read every section, asked questions. Mr. Davidson never rushed me. I appreciated that. When everything was in motion, I sat back. There's one more thing, I said. He raised his eyebrows. I want a clause in my own will that if either of my sons challenges any part of these arrangements after I'm gone, they lose everything completely. Davidson didn't seem shocked. You want a no-contest provision. He wrote it down without another word. Some people might say that was mean, harsh even. But people who say that have never looked into the eyes of their own child and seen greed instead of love. I left the office with a small stack of paperwork and a strange sense of peace. It wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was more like the quiet after a thunderstorm when the air still feels electric, but the sky is finally clear. I took the long way home. Drove past the elementary school where I'd worked as a lunch lady for 28 years. The playground was empty, swings moving in the breeze. I used to walk there with Marcus holding one hand and Danny holding the other. Their coats half transparency. I almost laughed out loud. That's the word people use when they want to see through you, not understand you. I deleted both messages. Then I sat down and wrote 2 letters. One to Marcus, one to Danny. Short, calm, direct. I got your messages. I'm not interested in discussing Jim's estate right now. All matters are being handled through my lawyer. Please send any future questions to him. Mother. Not love, not warmth. They'd understand the message. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And when a woman wakes up after years of giving, of making herself smaller to fit into spaces others carved for her, she doesn't go back to sleep. Never again. The next morning my doorbell rang at 8:45. I was still in my robe, coffee in hand. Through the peephole, I saw a red car parked crooked at the curb. Marcus's car. He hadn't parked in front of my apartment in years. Always too busy, always somewhere else. I didn't answer right away. Let him wait. The second ring came faster, more impatient. He was always frustrated when the world didn't move at his speed. When I opened the door, he gave me a smile I recognized from every holiday dinner after Tony died. The kind of smile that looked painted on. Hi, Mom, he said, like we hadn't just faced off across a lawyer's desk 2 days ago. I was in the neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. At 8:45 on a Saturday morning. He laughed like I was joking. Can I come in? I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see what he'd try next. He walked in like he remembered where everything was. Looked around like something had changed, though he couldn't figure out what. Nothing had moved, not the furniture anyway. I didn't offer coffee. He sat on the edge of my couch, fingers locked together. Dress shirt too fancy for a casual visit. I wanted to talk, he began. There seems to have been some confusion with Jim's paperwork. Danny and I were caught off guard. Were you? I asked softly. He paused. Oh yes. Nobody told us there was an old business agreement, one that changes everything. 'Cause you didn't ask. He blinked. You assumed, I continued. You assumed Jim left everything to you. That I would sit quietly and nod along like I always did. I wouldn't put it that way, Mom. No, you wouldn't. I folded my hands in my lap. But I would, and I just did. The pause that followed was thick with unspoken words. Then he leaned forward. Mom, we're family. We should be working together here. We can fix this. We can find a compromise. His voice had that tone again, that edge of salesmanship. You're very good at what you do, Marcus. Selling people things. I'm not trying to sell you anything. You sold me before, I interrupted. When you said I needed to sign over the insurance money for taxes. He closed his mouth, looked down. There it was. I'm not angry, I said. That's not what this is about. I'm done. I've made arrangements. Everything is being handled legally. And if you try to fight it, you'll lose anything I still control. He looked up. You're really going to cut us off. I'm going to stop rewarding neglect. He sat back. And for the first time in years, he had nothing to say. Danny showed up 3 days later without warning. Not in a business shirt like his brother, but in his usual jeans and work boots. He didn't knock at first, just stood outside my door, shifting his weight like a boy waiting to be called in for dinner. I watched him through the window for a full minute before opening the door. He smiled sheepishly. It had been years since he'd called me that. You here to talk or do you need something fixed? Yes. He scratched his beard. Maybe both. I stepped aside. He walked in, took off his boots without me asking. A detail Marcus had forgotten. Sat at my kitchen table like he used to when he was broke and trying to avoid admitting it. Made tea. Old habits. We sat quietly while it cooled. You know, he said finally. I didn't know about the old partnership. Marcus handled everything with the lawyers. I just trusted him. I stirred my tea. You always did. Guess I should have asked questions. I looked at him. He seemed tired, older than I remembered, even though he had the same boyish smile. But I knew better than to mistake exhaustion for regret. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, slid it across the table. I don't want money, Ma. That's not why I'm here. This is everything you loaned me. All the amounts. I know I can't pay it back all at once, but I want to try. That surprised me. Not because of the gesture. I knew how people like to offer just enough to look noble. But because of the math. Every number was correct. Down to the $40 I'd given him for lunch money 5 years ago. Picked up the paper. You kept track. He nodded. Always meant to make it right. I just didn't know how to bring it up. And now you do. I guess watching Marcus scramble for something that wasn't his made me think. I let the silence sit between us. I was angry, he added. At the meeting, at you, at Jim, at everything. But I wasn't surprised. Not really. Why not? Because you're not stupid, Ma. You were never stupid. I think maybe we just counted on you acting like you were. I looked down at the steam rising from my cup. He wasn't wrong. It wasn't that they thought I didn't understand. It's that they thought I'd never speak up even if I did. I want to earn back your trust, Danny said quietly. Then don't fight the partnership, I said. Don't hire lawyers. Don't let Marcus talk you into anything. Just leave it alone. Let it be what it is. He nodded slowly. Can do that. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I just looked at him and said good. And for once that felt like enough. I wasn't surprised when the letter from Marcus's lawyer came. I was surprised it took him a whole week. It arrived in a thick white envelope with gold edges and a return address from a downtown firm I knew by reputation. Expensive, aggressive, and always polite while sharpening their knives. The letter was courteous. It used words like unfortunate misunderstanding and needs clarification and mutual resolution. It requested a brief meeting to discuss options. It didn't mention money directly, but it didn't need to. It ended with, our client hopes to avoid formal court action, but reserves the right to pursue all legal options should discussions fail. I read it once, then again, then set it down. Somewhere deep in my chest something old stirred. Not fear, not quite. More like memory. A memory of the girl I once was, sitting in a crowded bank with Tony, signing our first loan papers while a banker talked over me like I wasn't there. I hadn't spoken up then, not once. Just nodded and signed and smiled when it was done. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and called Mr. Davidson. He answered on the first ring. I was expecting how I'd stood in the water with my arms open, promising I'd catch him. And I did every single time. There's no word for the pain of knowing someone you once caught without question would now rather watch you drown. The next morning I wrote Marcus a letter. Not through lawyers, not for court. For him. It was 1 page typed. Marcus, I got your attorney's letter. You've made your position clear. Here's mine. I will not give up the partnership. I will not consider compromise. I will not sit across from men who see me only as an obstacle to their plans. You've already taken enough from me. I'm simply choosing for the first time not to give you more. Mother. I printed it, folded it, put it in an envelope with no return address. Drove to the post office myself and dropped it in the slot. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I felt like someone who'd set down a heavy suitcase after carrying it too far for too long. When I got home, the light on my answering machine was blinking. Emma's voice. Hi, Mrs. Chen. I hope this week hasn't been too hard on you. I made chocolate chip cookies, the kind you like with extra chips. I'll bring them by tomorrow, okay? Miss you. Smiled. For the first time in days I smiled. The world had gotten smaller, yes, but not in the way Marcus thought. It hadn't closed in on me. It had gotten clearer, reduced to only the people who mattered. And in that clarity, there was finally room to breathe. Emma arrived the next afternoon with a container of chocolate chip cookies and that gentle knock she always used, like she wasn't sure she was welcome even after all these years. I opened the door before she could knock twice. She smiled when she saw me. Still quick on your feet, I see. Still sweeter than you need to be, I said, stepping aside. She carried the container carefully like it was made of glass. Inside, the cookies were wrapped in plastic wrap, arranged in perfect rows. Jim would have liked that attention, the thoughtfulness, the care. We sat at my table, same as always. I made us tea, poured from my best teapot, the one with a small chip on the spout. Emma never mentioned the chip. She just held her cup with both hands and listened. Have they called again? She asked after a while, without saying who she meant. Marcus sent a lawyer. Danny came by twice. And I told them what needed to be said. She nodded, eyes down, picking at the plastic wrap. I'm proud of you. That caught me off guard. I almost laughed. I couldn't remember the last time someone said that to me. I looked at her. 24. Hair always pulled back. Freckles across her cheeks. Kindness in every gesture. She was my neighbor's blood, not mine by birth. But family finds its way. You remind me of him sometimes, I said. Not the way you look, just the way you care about people. Emma's eyes got soft. He was good to me. Even when he forgot my name, he still waved at me like he knew me. He did know you. His heart never forgot. We sat a while longer, drinking tea, eating cookies in comfortable silence. Then I told her. Not everything, but enough. That the partnership was real, that things were being transferred, that a trust was being set up in her name. Small but steady. Enough to give her options. She went very still. You don't have to do that. I know, I said. But why me? Because you show up. 'Cause you stay. Because you never once asked for anything and always brought something anyway. Your time, your attention, your chocolate chip cookies. She looked down, eyes watering. I don't deserve that kind of trust. Nobody does, I said gently. That's what makes it trust. It's not earned. It's given. We finished our tea. She helped with the dishes even though I told her not to. And before she left, she turned at the door. If they ever try to make you feel small again, she said, just call me. I'll remind you who you are. I didn't cry until the door closed. Not because I was sad, but because someone said they would protect me and I believed them. The call came late. I'd already turned off the lights, put on my nightgown, folded the day away like a used newspaper. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. At my age, you answer because you never know what might not wait until morning. Mom. Annie. His voice was low, strained. Not like the Danny who used to call when his truck broke down or when he'd forgotten to pay his electric bill. This was something different. Are you all right? Yes. There was a long pause. Marcus filed papers with the court. He's challenging the partnership. Closed my eyes. Not from shock, just tiredness. He says it's fake, Danny continued. That Jim was too sick to make business decisions. That you tricked him. He wasn't sick then. I know that. Then let him fight shadows. Another silence. I don't know what to do, he said. He's threatening to sue me if I don't back him up. That made me sit up straighter in bed. He thinks I'm taking your side, which I guess I am. But he's furious. Says I'm betraying family. I nearly laughed out loud. Betraying family. As if Marcus hadn't redrawn the lines himself. As if loyalty was a weapon he could pick up and drop whenever he pleased. Do what you need to protect yourself, I said calmly. But don't protect him at the cost of your backbone. I'm not as strong as you think I am, Ma. You don't have to be strong. You just have to be honest. He didn't respond to that. You're not a child anymore, Danny. You don't need your brother's permission to do what's right. He sighed. I wish Dad was here. He did too. Tony had a way of settling things. Not with anger but with presence. He'd say one sentence and people would stop arguing. He believed in fairness but not foolishness. Dad would have told you to stop asking what Marcus wants and ask yourself what's right. No. I also know you're scared. That's okay. Just don't let fear be the loudest voice in your head. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing dramatic, no big confessions. Just the quiet work of two people trying to find the edge of a mess someone else made. After we hung up, I stayed awake a long time, staring at the ceiling. Marcus wanted a war. Fine. He could have one. But not with shouting, not with fighting. With silence. With boundaries. With the kind of dignity that doesn't bend when pushed or break when attacked. I made tea, sat by my window. The night was gentle. Wind moving through the trees, stars peeking between clouds. Marcus had no idea what it meant to be truly alone. But if he kept going, he'd learn. And it wouldn't be me who taught him. It would be the silence of every door he chose to slam shut. The apartment was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that makes you nervous. It was the kind that holds its own weight. A stillness earned, not forced. I watered my plants. I straightened the throw pillow on my couch. I folded my laundry slowly, carefully, as if every shirt and towel deserved my complete attention. I hadn't always been this way. Years ago, when Tony was alive and the boys were young, everything was chaos. Cereal bowls in the sink, jackets thrown over chairs, homework scattered across the table. Back then, silence was rare. Now it was my friend. It was almost noon when the mail came. Thick envelope, legal paper, the court seal stamped on the front. Marcus had followed through. I opened it at my kitchen table with my letter opener. A small silver one I'd had since 1978. A retirement gift from the school principal. Inside, formal notification of Marcus's court motion to challenge the partnership. Claims of mental manipulation, allegations of Jim's incompetence, a request to freeze all money transfers until a judge could review the partnership agreement. There was in black ink. A son suing his mother. I set the letter down. Not slowly, not dramatically. Just set it down. Then I picked up my phone and called Davidson. Got it, I said when he answered. So did I. What happens next? File a response. Then we wait. Will it delay anything? He hesitated. Might temporarily. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Let me know what you need from me. I already sent our response. It'll be fine, Sarah. We're still on solid ground. After the call, I made a sandwich, ate it while standing at the counter. Then I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out Jim's favorite photo album. Thick cardboard, worn at the corners, full of pictures from years most people had forgotten. There he was in 1989, standing on a fishing boat in a yellow rain jacket. In 1995, grinning at a company picnic, face smudged with barbecue sauce. In 2005, standing beside me in front of our childhood home, holding hands like we were kids again. He didn't look incompetent. He looked alive. And now somehow he was being turned into evidence. That was the cruelty of it. The way Marcus wasn't just challenging me but erasing Jim. Painting his final years as confusion. His choices as invalid. His judgment as broken. As if love made him weak. As if trust made him a fool. I sat with that for a long time. The anger didn't come all at once. It arrived like morning fog, creeping in slowly until suddenly I couldn't see the horizon. And when it reached my throat, I stood up. I walked to my bedroom closet, pulled down my memory box again. Inside were Jim's notebooks. Not all of them, just the ones from his final years. He'd stopped writing toward the end, but before that, he'd written plenty. I flipped through pages. Entries about his illness, about me, about how he wanted his business handled. About his decision to keep our partnership strong. His handwriting was firm, his thoughts were clear. No confusion, no fog. I made copies of the most important entries, took them to the copy shop the next morning, had them bound, labeled them. When I mailed them to Davidson, I included a note. If they want proof of his mind, give them his words. I didn't wait for Marcus to call. I didn't care if he did. I'd stopped explaining myself years ago. I'd just forgotten to act like it. The bank, they offered me water. That was new. The woman behind the counter, Patricia, professional, efficient, young enough to be Emma's sister, called me Mrs. Chen with careful respect. Not because I demanded it, but because Davidson had called ahead. I have the forms here, she said, sliding a folder across the counter. This authorizes the transfer of all business accounts into your name, completely separate from the previous estate structure. He nodded. And the trust. Being created as we speak. The money will stay secure until you decide how to distribute it. I signed one form, then another. My name on each line, my hand steady. I'd been intimidated once by banks, by lawyers, by terms like irrevocable and power of attorney. I used to smile and nod while men explained things I already knew just to keep peace. Now I asked questions. Now I signed without apologizing. Patricia handed me a folder. If anyone tries to access these accounts, you'll be notified immediately. They won't, I said. But thank you. She smiled. Real. If more customers were like you, my job would be easier. I left with a folder under my arm, the sun warm, the sidewalk solid under my feet. I passed two teenagers arguing on the corner. Loud voices, wild gestures. And I didn't flinch. Once I might have crossed the street, but not today. I walked past the grocery store where Tony and I used to buy ice cream on Sundays. Past the park bench where I once watched Marcus learn to tie his shoes. Past the courthouse where Jim and I signed our partnership side by side, laughing like kids planning a secret. None of those places felt heavy anymore. They just felt real. When I got home, the mail was already in my box. One envelope, handwritten. Annie. Inside was a note. Short, honest. Ma, I told Marcus I'm not joining his lawsuit. He didn't take it well. Said some things I won't repeat. But I'm not backing down. I'll pay back what I owe you, even if it takes 20 years. I hope someday you'll believe I mean that. D. I sat at my kitchen table with a letter in my lap, feeling its weight. He'd made a choice. Real one. Not perfect but brave. That night I went to my closet and pulled down a different box. One that held the start of my own final plans. Bank statements, insurance forms, a draft of my will, still unfinished. I sat on my bedroom floor, papers spread around me like a puzzle. For once, I didn't feel overwhelmed. Felt steady. And that's when I started writing. Not just the legal language, though I included all that clear and firm. But more. A letter to be opened after I'm gone. To Emma, to explain what was hers and why. To tell her she reminded me what family could feel like without demands or debts or burden. To tell her that I chose her not because she was perfect, but because she was present. And to thank her quietly for coming back every time when others walked away. I wrote the final line just before midnight. You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. The right to decide how my story ends. Not in silence, but in peace. I sealed it, filed it, and went to bed with no noise in my head, no pain in my bones. Just quiet. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that stays. I heard the knock before I saw the car. 3 soft taps, not urgent but certain. When I opened the door, Marcus was standing there. No business suit this time, no briefcase. Just a jacket, regular pants, and a look I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager caught lying. He didn't ask to come in. But I figured I'd try one more time, he said. I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. I know you're angry. Do you? Yes. He looked down, then up again. I've been thinking about what Danny said. About what you said. About Jim. Still I said nothing. I know I handled things badly. Badly. What a small word. Like spilling coffee, not betrayal. Not disrespect. Just badly. I was trying to protect the business, he continued. You thought he didn't know his own mind. I interrupted. You thought he couldn't possibly have made a decision without asking you first. His jaw tightened. He was getting confused, Mom. You know he was. And he still had more clarity than you showed. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stepped onto my front step, closed the door behind me, so we stood outside exposed to the wind. I didn't want his presence sticking to the walls of my home. I have nothing left to give you, I said. And I won't pretend to respect someone who tried to strip dignity from the dead just to get money. You think I'm some kind of monster. Well, I think you're a boy who never learned how to lose. That hit him. He didn't speak. Just looked out at my small garden where the wind had scattered apple blossoms across the walkway like confetti. I used to admire you, I said, quieter now. Not because you were successful, but because you made things happen. You had energy, focus, charm. He nodded, still not looking at me. But somewhere along the way you started believing you were owed things. That success meant you couldn't be questioned. That anything outside your plan was a mistake to be fixed. I was scared, he said. When Dad died, we all were scared. So what now? You never speak to me again. I'm speaking now, I said. But I'm not going to reward your behavior with comfort. He breathed out. You're really going to leave it all to Emma. Some of it. The rest is going to places that mattered to Jim. The hospital, the animal shelter, organizations that gave more than they took. He rubbed his hands together, getting cold. Then I guess this is it. Yes, I said. And it was. He turned, walked down my steps, got into his car. No yelling, no door slamming. Just a slow drive away from the curb. I stayed outside long after he was gone. The wind calmed. The light changed. I sat on the step Tony built and watched a cat walk across my garden, unaware of the lifetime of memories echoing around it. I didn't feel triumphant. Felt clean. There's a kind of grief that comes after clarity. Not the grief of loss, but of letting go of what never really belonged to you. Expectations, illusions, roles you played so long you forgot they weren't really yours. I wasn't just their mother. I was a woman, a sister, a worker, a keeper of promises. And I had one more promise to keep. Myself. No more shrinking. No more smoothing things over. Not even for blood. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd only seen it once before years ago, when I was called for jury duty. Back then it felt huge, intimidating. All dark wood and shiny railings. Place built to make people feel small. But today it didn't feel that way. Not to me. Davidson sat beside me, calm, prepared. He'd brought copies of everything. The 2010 partnership, the notarized statements, Jim's notebook pages. Even a photograph of the two of us signing the agreement at the government office. Marcus sat at the other table alone. His lawyer had called in sick, or so the clerk whispered. I didn't believe it. I think the man simply saw the truth and chose not to damage his reputation chasing a hopeless case. The judge was a woman, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with no patience for theater. She read through the case file, asked Davidson 3 questions, then turned to Marcus. You've submitted a motion challenging the validity of a 2010 business partnership. Correct. Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. On what grounds? I believe my uncle was no longer mentally capable when he signed the agreement. Davidson didn't flinch. He simply handed the judge a folder. In that folder, he said, you'll find multiple documents confirming the deceased's mental capacity at the time of signing, including his own writing, verified by a handwriting expert, and testimony from his doctor dated the same week. The judge flipped through it quietly. Then she looked up at Marcus. Do you have any documentation to support your claim? Marcus shifted. No, Your Honor, but then this is speculation and assumption. We don't run courtrooms on either. He opened his mouth again, but she raised a hand. I've seen enough, she said. There is no merit to this challenge. The partnership stands as written. Motion dismissed. Just like that. She tapped her gavel once, short and final. Davidson leaned toward me and whispered, "It's over." I nodded, not because I doubted him, but because I'd already known. Marcus walked out without looking at me. I watched him go, not with hate, just distance. Like watching a stranger leave a room I no longer had to sit in. Outside, the sun was bright on the pavement. Davidson offered to drive me home, but I said no. I wanted to walk. I walked through downtown, past the old diner where Tony proposed to me over burnt toast and weak coffee. Past the bus stop where Danny used to wait with his backpack dragging on the ground. Past the bookstore where Jim once bought me a used cookbook I never opened. Everything looked the same and nothing did. At home, I changed into my softest sweater, put water on for tea, and sat at my window. Emma would be coming by soon. She always did on Saturdays. I pictured her smile. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she listened like it was an art form. I had one final envelope to give her. Not for money, not for property. For understanding. Inside were 4 pages. My handwriting careful and deliberate. This is not a reward. This is recognition. You showed up. You stayed. You asked nothing and gave everything. I wanted you to know that even in a room full of people I raised, you made me feel seen. Someday you may be standing where I am now, looking back instead of forward. If that day comes, I want you to remember this. You owe no one your silence. Not for peace. Not for family. Not for love.